Well, Alexandria, thank you for hopping on. This is actually a secret intervention. I think your family is quite concerned that you're addicted to life and travel, so we need to address this.
Oh no.
Let's 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 start with this. Just go back to the very basics, and I'm going to try to do my best here to not ask the same questions that everyone and their brother always asks, like about travel. But in your perspective, what is a digital nomad?
I've met many. There's a lot of variety to being a digital nomad. And I would say, me personally, I've had a different journey than many other digital nomads, but basically, it's having the freedom to be able to travel and work while you're overseas or on a staycation or being able to pack up and just go anywhere and sustain life.
One of the things that I which really caught my attention is you had a video that was almost 6, 7 years ago at this point, and it was spookily similar to a video that I made. And there was a part of me that was like gonna have you watch it ahead of time so that you could understand the context. But for me, I mean, you listed like the different things that you had done and just kind of this restlessness that you hold a little bit, right? And I actually like the exact same video where I actually started off with, I don't know if it's a fear of sitting still or a desire to keep moving. And one thing I wanted to ask you is why? What makes you do this? Like what makes you go to all of these different places? So what most people would probably say is like, Alexandria, get a real job, right? What are you doing? Why are you wasting your life? Why are you doing this, kind of thing? What would you have to say to that?
I've tried it. I've tried. Do you know how many jobs I've had? I had 6 jobs in Canada at the beginning of this summer because I wanted to please my family and come home and be close to them. Okay, 6 jobs. It's the only way you can afford to travel. And actually, no, it's the only way you can afford to live in Vancouver. So, because I'm working all the time, I never get to see my family anyways. And I'm just thinking, wow, it'd be so much nicer if I was just in Southeast Asia or East Africa or maybe going somewhere I've never been before because it's so much more affordable. And people don't realize this. They think you have to have a big house with a huge mortgage payment and a 9 to 5, which I've tried for 3 months of my life. I had a job at an office and I was a telemarketer. And I just used it to try different accents. I was like, can we talk to the Southern girl? Which one? Oh, I can't remember her name. Is it Alexandria? Yeah, yeah. Can I talk to the British girl? Like, I got to practice my Southern drawl, and I was just goofy. I didn't care because I knew that job wasn't going to last. But I tried to be normal. I tried to work for people. I've tried serving. I won't do that again. I like to have freedom. And I think for me, trapping myself with a job that I'm counting down the hours until it finishes or living for the weekends is not fulfilling. I'd rather make less money and experience more.
Well, it seems that you have done quite a significant amount of that, to say the least. So, at risk of asking the worst possible question to ever ask a digital nomad, I'm going to do it anyway and embarrass myself. How many countries would you guess that you've been to?
23.
Okay, well, you have that number on lock, like, right?
But the thing is, it's a high number for some people, a low number for others. Like some of my friends are content creators and they're at like 70 countries. But when I go to a country, like I lived in Japan for 4 years, or almost 4 years, basically 3, I really want to get to know that country. I want to know what it's like there and then maybe travel to other countries. But even when I go, I want to go for a month and really get to know where I'm staying because I am looking for my new home. And you can't get that from a resort in a week.
Yeah, and I do think people really underestimate when you do is it I mean it's short-term rentals in the real estate world, but it's kind of long-term for the digital nomad, but when you do the month long or the 3 month, how you can get really good rates, especially in places like Thailand, right? Vietnam, Cambodia, a lot of South America as well. So for you, where is home, would you say, as of now?
I don't have a home right now, and I'm okay with that. Right now, I'm at my aunt and uncle's place. I am staying here watching their dogs and their garden, which is 2 hours to water the garden every night, and like picking berries every morning. And I'm going to their garden, which is amazing. I love it. I picked my own carrots this morning, and I went to the neighbor just down the street, and I got eggs from him. And it's the best quality ingredients. And that's what I love about traveling too, is having this kind of experience, getting quality food. Because when you live in the city, you don't know your neighbor and you don't get the best quality food. I don't like going and supporting supermarkets. The more I travel, the less I want to go to supermarkets. I want to go to little farmers markets.
That's one thing that so when I've been in Okinawa now, and it's kind of been the base station. Um, so I had a really similar journey to you, um, with a few differences. But I was at university, had a conversation with a professor. The conversation went a direction I very much so thought was not going to go that way. Which essentially, I came to the professor and said, "Hey, some of the curriculum you're teaching is wrong." Now, I thought he was going to say, or she was going to say, "Oh, Quinton, you think you know everything, blah, blah, blah." She didn't. She literally said, "I know, but I have to. It's curriculum." And I had that same flash in my head of like, wait a minute. I'm
Mm,
going to teach myself incorrect information so that hopes that I can get a job. If you've ever seen like The Wizard of Oz, like the Emperor has no clothes, and pulled that veil back, and I was like, your response, Professor, was way different than I thought it would be. And now, like I've seen that curtain, I'm not wasting this life, right? I'm not like, and it's significantly more about those experiences, right? For you, right? If you had to pinpoint it into one, is it a fear of sitting still or a desire to keep moving? Would you say?
definitely a desire to keep moving because I'm a very curious person, and I say that I'm addicted to connecting with people. And I have this weird. I looked at my friend the other day. I was listening to some people speak in Punjabi, and I was just listening to try to see what words I could understand because I'm a bit of a linguist. I love languages, and every time I travel anywhere, I've never been to India yet, but I like to learn the languages because you learn so much about the culture. So I turned to my friend and I was like, there's this superpower that I think I have, but I actually don't. And they're like, what? I'm like, I like have it in my mind that I can understand every language. And I just wish I could. And then every time I hear somebody speaking a language, usually an Asian language I understand, I just say anything to them so we can connect. And they're like, "Oh, how do you speak Korean? How do you know Japanese? How do you know Mandarin?" I only know Itian, but I know enough to compliment a woman. I always learn how to say like alun dapta, which is Korean for beautiful, or like "你很漂亮," which is Mandarin, and like "maganda" is Tagalog. I always learn. I don't even know how to compliment men, but you get a lot more flies when you compliment women. I learned this as a solo female traveler. As a woman complimenting a man, they have different intentions, but women really love helping other women.
They really do. They really do. I think a lot of Westerners, right? So I grew up in Nashville, and the university I was talking about was Ole Miss, and it's I mean it's deep South. That is like when you hear that expression, that's literally what that is. And you get this idea or this preconceived idea of what it's going to be. So, um, and then you go there and there's just this. Yesterday, for example, I'm at the store and an Okinawan gentleman. I genuinely thought he was Italian because he was looking to the side, and he had salt and pepper hair, and he was wearing an Italian shirt. And my family is from Sicily, so I like, oh, Italian, and just start basic, very basic, right? And turns, and of course I see that he's not Italian. He's Okinawan. But he was so welcoming, right? Him and his friend. Most people don't realize that Japan is a very heavy drinking culture. Not in like a get wasted way, but just drinking in general. And they like immediately invited me, like, "What are you doing tonight? You should come drink with us." Now I was a little busy, but nevertheless, when I first got to Okinawa, I lived in the city. Like it's called Urasoishi, right? It is Urasoy City, and it was like that city planet in Star Wars for a while, and it was just hard for me. And when I moved up into the Yambaru, into the real jungle, a very very small village, and now the vegetables everywhere, and I'm always like looking for the local, little box that they have out, and just like what is it, the honor system of like put the coins in there. I'm not sure necessarily if the mainland still goes through that as
We
much.
still have that in my hometown, like where I'm at now. I love just getting like eggs. Good quality eggs go a really long way. So it's $5, and the farm down the street from my parents' place, it's still $5. And I met the owner's kid, and they said that they're actually losing money because of inflation of well, just everything, the interest rates and everything. But they don't want to change the price of eggs because so many people can't afford to go to the store and buy like $9 cartons of farmed eggs, like, well, or factory farmed eggs. So like we want to give people better quality eggs, so we'll take a little hit.
For you, when you get local, is that kind of one of the ways that you get integrated so quickly, is using your linguistic powers to connect, kind of give a compliment to a local woman, and then build a relationship in a genuine way, and then they kind of, I mean, they know the best restaurants, they always know where to get the vegetables, they know, right? If that makes any sense, is that when you're there kind of longer term, is that one of the secrets that you've kind of used?
Yeah, I keep it minimalistic. I know a lot of my travel blogger friends that stay in the nicest resorts. They get flown in from the Fairmont. I mean, they make good money. They do. They post really high quality content, but it's no, everyone's got their style. Everyone's got their style. Everyone's got their preferences. For me, I've tried the edited, like beautiful, oh, this place is so beautiful. But I like to just be real. And I would rather sleep on a floor getting eaten by ants in the Philippines and know that I used to go to the Philippines every May. It was mainit, very hot. I love the Philippines though. It was my first home away from home before Japan. And now I haven't been back since because the photographer who used to fly me in, she hasn't gone back in a really long time. But they like welcomed me into their family. It was wonderful. But going with locals as well, like in the Philippines, she told me, "Oh yeah, it's kind of what do they call it? In the province." Oh, we're kind of in the province. Well, you get to Manila, and then you take another flight, and then from that flight you have to drive for a couple of hours, and then they're trying to teach me the local dialect. I'm like, "Well, teach me Tagalog because when I go to Manila, no one's gonna understand me saying like good morning here. I want to learn it in Tagalog." But like I try to travel with locals before I was traveling solo. So I used to always travel for work. And usually it was like a local who would bring me to their country as like a landscape like model with like a long flowy dress. So it was it was great to learn how to travel initially through modeling. And that's where I got the opportunity to start traveling. I my first trip outside of North America was to Peking, Beijing, and I fell in love. I was like, oh, this is so different. The the history, the buildings, the food is strange. Like I look so different from everyone. I was I I also was staying in a Shangri-La and I had never stayed in a nice hotel before. And like we had a film crew and it was so cool. And I was like, I love this. But traveling isn't always like that. Like it went from like I was doing really bougie trips modeling to the pandemic. I stayed in Japan for, I was planning to be there for 3 months. It turned into 3 years. I had a visa for 4 years, but for one of the years, I just decided to travel Southeast Asia. And it was the first time in my life I ever really traveled solo without a plan. So I went and my best friends, like two of my best friends wanted to go to Vietnam, and I never even really thought of it. And I was like, okay, sure, why not? And we spent 3 or 4 days together there, and I had a couple months open. I went. I knew I had to get to Thailand to do my yoga teaching certificate. So I just went with the flow, made friends along the way, and I have some stories. I've got books that I've been writing on my journeys, but there's also like a part of me where, much like with every video I've ever edited and uploaded, you just don't know if your content is worth it. But I think I do have some pretty interesting stories. And I love writing.
So one thing, I do not want to cut you off, but one thing here, see if I can get out of the way. There's a book here. It's called The Five Rings. He is basically Musashi. He was basically the idea of Japanese culture and balance, right? And warriors in the garden versus gardeners in the war. That really that philosophy largely came from him. And you're probably thinking like, how is that even relevant? Okay. One of the things that's fascinating to me, which when you start reading his book, is this is from the 1500s. He writes, or it's written in his book that they have no idea what happened to his father, more or less, but they know exactly what happened to him, and they know exactly about how he influenced sword fighting and the samurai way and how he influenced the philosophy of life of balance within Japan. For some reason, when I was reading that, I just remember thinking, we have no idea what happened to his father, but the only reason why we have any idea what happened to him was he took the time to actually write his words down and the impact that he had made. I don't even know, 600 years later, whatever, it's 500 years later, because he took the time to not just write them down, but to put that out there, right? So I'm a pretty big journaler, and I don't know if I would ever, necessarily publish journals, right? But I want to encourage you to maybe put those out there in the future. Obviously, don't rush and go crazy, but I think far more people would learn from your experiences than you would even think. And that doesn't necessarily have to be bullet point teaching lessons, right? But just even the philosophy of like, I get one life. And that's something I'm recently just like obsessed with this idea. Two ideas that for some reason I'm just obsessed with, right? The quote that you read is, how would you actually live if you truly knew God lived within you? Because I think people of all religions say that, but they don't actually believe that. And if they did believe that, they would make more time for God. Like, Would you spend some time with God if you actually believe? Yes, of course. So why is it so difficult for us to have a morning devotional or the secret place or any of these, whatever religion, right? So you had mentioned hearing Punjabi. My best friend growing up was Arham. He's from Punjab, right? He was from Pakistan actually. But so I grew up hearing Punjabi, and Abdelrahman would speak Arabic and hearing about all of these different faiths. So I was able to really ask and kind of, which was weird for Middle Tennessee and Nashville, as you could imagine. But the idea that God lives within you, I'm obsessed with. And then that other idea that I'm just like weirdly obsessed with is it doesn't even matter what religion you are. They all agree you only get one life in this body. Even if you are believing into reincarnation, it's a different body. It's a different life. It's a different time. So I'm just obsessed with those two ideas. I don't necessarily know what I'm going to do with them or what that entails, but I would encourage you to come full circle to maybe consider it a little bit, because I think that impacted me a lot just reading, like, we have no idea what happened to his dad, and we wouldn't even know what happened to him. He just happened to write it down, right? So you kind of touched on a few different things that I was gonna later ask on, but one of the things I noticed very quickly is the ability you have with languages. Is that like natural? Is that, I mean, you said you kind of pretend you have a superpower,
I
but
know.
even your Japanese is, or is it just intentional?
I mean, I think most things that we do in life is intentional. There's always an intention behind our actions. But living in Japan, in Tokyo, and not being able to speak Japanese during COVID, when all of my friends left, I actually started a modeling agency, and I was, I was, I was doing really well before COVID. Like I was making good money, and I I got like 6 models initially to move out to Tokyo, and we were living in a share house during COVID, and then they all eventually left. One girl stayed with me for a while, and I said, "Okay." Like I was still making good money because I already had established clients there, and I supported her for a while, and she was like my emotional support. We lived together. We ended up moving to the coast to Ichinomiya in Chiba, which is in the middle of nowhere. So I actually learned how to surf there. And in Ichinomiya, we were the only two foreigners. So I went out, and every morning I would surf and I'd be like, "Ohayou gozaimasu." Or at first I started by saying, "Ohayo." And then someone's like, "Ohayou gozaimasu." Oh, okay. Gozaimasu. And then, you just get better. And I bought a kyokasho, I bought a textbook, and it was the pandemic. So I was like, I'm just going to read. I read the whole textbook, cover to cover, and I was really interested in it. So I booked a job with Sony that allowed me to have enough funds to move back to the city. And I, yeah, I continued to study, and I started doing private lessons with my sensei, Hidaka. She's wonderful. She's like another mother to me. And then I moved in with a family, and I realized like the fastest way to learn a language is through children. So I was living with 3 kids, and eventually I started off talking to like the 2-year-old. Then I worked my way up, and now I can talk to pretty much anyone, no problem. So learning Japanese is challenging. Learning the kanji is very challenging, but if you enjoy it and if you know like it's going to benefit you, like I don't know how people can live in Japan for 14, 15 years and they only know how to say arigato.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but like as you know, I was just recently baptized. You can cut this out if you want, but you mentioned God earlier, so you're okay talking about it. So I just recently got baptized, and I've got like a Bible study group, and I explained to the girls, because I'm interested in languages, the Bible is a language, it is a textbook, it's how you connect to God, which is like the best thing ever. So I have really been diving into the word a lot lately, and I've been surrounding myself with Christians, and I've just been like not preaching the gospel, but after getting baptized, I thought I wouldn't be able to live stream anymore. And I know a lot of people are curious how digital nomads make money. Yeah, I've got multiple streams of income, and sometimes it's like I did videos for this Japanese app, and that it was so many hours, but yeah, now I'm doing English videos for this app, and I also live stream. So I would live stream while I was like getting ready or like listening to music. I would dance a little bit, but after getting baptized, I started reading the Bible. And my stream had never had more people. I was asking for their favorite quotes, and like it just makes you realize that when you're learning a new language or a new concept, you want to surround yourself with these people, those like similar people, but you also like want to spread, like you want to practice. So that's what I was like with Japanese too. I was so excited. I just wanted to talk to everyone. And even now, I want to speak to everyone in Japanese. I'm learning Swahili as well. In like I was in Tanzania for a few months this year, and I booked a one-way flight to Tanzania in October, and I'm just letting the Lord do his work and let me know when and where I go from there.
That's amazing. It's that's actually why I'm going to Taiwan. So I'm not a I wouldn't call myself I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian for quite a long time. Um I guess since I was 14 is when I was baptized, and but there wasn't a living water. There wasn't like a living spirit. I didn't feel that until actually going to Scotland when I left university, and I experienced that for the first time. Um and there is something real about it, which is partly why I'm so obsessed with this idea of Second Colossians, where it's like the mystery kept hidden from the ages, and that is his quote, "Christ in you." Like it's like and if you read that whole chapter, because I think everyone is so worried about context. If you read that whole chapter, he's basically just describing God in you, like Christ in you. And it's like, how would you actually live if that's what you actually believed on a day-to-day basis, right? On a morning, on a evening, when you're angry. And believe me, I'm not perfect. So that's actually something I was also going to ask about is your journey of faith a little bit. And you don't have to go, wildly into too many details because I'm sure some of them are a little personal, but what was that journey of faith for you? Because I mean, I have a feeling traveling and experiencing these different cultures like opened that up a little bit, at least to start.
Yeah, so I love my testimony. It's one of my favorite stories to share. I'm not going to get too deep because we don't have that much time, but um, I was raised Catholic, and my parents split. Then we fell out of faith. The church renovated my home, and I had really bad asthma. I was dying, so that church always stuck with me. I volunteered, and that church is part of the reason why I'm acting, because I gained confidence because I did public speaking on behalf of the church. I was like a little poster child. So I stopped stuttering when I would public speak because I used to be so nervous, so shy. They helped me get into acting. They helped me um, improve our home, which saved my life. And they never pushed me into religion. So I started volunteering. And it's part of the reason why I love volunteering so much. So I volunteered, I have volunteered a lot while I travel. And volunteering this past winter in Tanzania is when I decided, okay, no matter what, without a doubt, I have to get baptized. But I've been to mosques in Malaysia, Doha, Dubai. I've been to synagogues in LA, in Sherman Oaks. There's a huge Jewish community, same with in New York. I've been to synagogues. I've studied about Islam. I've studied about Judaism. I've studied about Buddhism, Taoism, Shintoism in Japan. I like the idea of reincarnation. It'd be cool if we got a second chance. But I would like to live my life knowing that this is my one life on earth and I need to make it count. But I also want to live more morally because when I fell out of faith, you live life differently. So I'm very grateful that I'm now back in a better position and I'm like stronger than ever. And I can tell my friends just certain quotes that might help them along their journey and quotes that have helped me along the way.
I think that's powerful, and I really think that I really hope people will hear that. From you. You know, it's funny you had mentioned word for word, you had said, I just want to be a little more real in my content. And I was actually going to say that as cheesy. I think the word authenticity in the content world is way overused and is a buzzword. And I think that usually represents like just not being fake. But I think there's a difference between not being fake and being real. And I literally planned on telling you when I was doing research and kind of going through everything, there is something real about your content and about the way you put yourself out there um, in such a unique way, right? Where you're doing sign language on ESL, you know, you're sharing. So I think, you know, a lot of Christians they're afraid to share that they're volunteering. Or it's the opposite side where they're because that's not part of like a digital nomad, you know, but or the other side is they want to share all the time about how they're volunteering and it's like that middle and it just something I don't know how to explain it, but just something when I was going through even your YouTube channel and just diving in, I was just like there's something real and you're an interesting paradox and not in a bad way and I mean that in the best possible way that I can, right? So you started modeling and you're posting about the volunteer work and you're really showing your true heart in all of these things. I think even before you were baptized, right? So there's something within you that felt the need to do these things, and you're sharing, you know, through your content in this way. Um, I don't want to divert the conversation into like how did you get into modeling, but I don't know another time to be able to throw that in there. And then I want to really go back into this authenticity topic here afterward. But how did you get into modeling? And you think you went into Beijing the first time you had mentioned so like where did all this come from?
I wasn't blessed financially. My family wasn't necessarily the most financially well off. So I knew I had to get money and I wanted to go to med school. So I got the highest grades in my grad class, which shocked everyone, including myself, because I didn't actually try that hard. And my mom got mad at me. She's like, "You need scholarships. You need to try harder in school." Okay, fine. I went to an art school though, so it's not that hard because I was like the main dancer. So I didn't know if I was going to take like a dance route or medical, and I decided neither. Hmm. So I actually started acting with the church a little bit, like I was spokesperson, and then they brought me to Kalamazoo, Michigan. We shot like a little short film. I've done some amazing facts videos, just little things here and there. And then my ballet, I wanted to become a pro ballerina, and now I'm grateful I didn't because I still am suffering with pain from doing ballet for like 8 hours a day. But because I was a ballerina, I was in a movie um, as like a hero ballerina in a George Clooney film, and it was my first role. And I got my name on a trailer. My mom's like, "Oh, it's gonna be the coolest thing you ever do." I'm like, "There's no way. This is the first thing." It kind of was the coolest thing I ever did, and I didn't have an agent, so I also like kind of got screwed around a little bit, and I learned like Hollywood. I went down to LA like 20 times or something like that in the beginning of my career. This was before the Me Too movement. I decided, wow, this place is evil. Like, I cannot deal with this. And I was just too innocent. And I was 18, 19, going down to LA by myself. And these producers and directors, I had to punch a director in the throat. Yeah. And he was, oh, you're going to be the next big thing. No, I don't mind. I'll punch you in the throat. Back off. But I it was acting and modeling. And I started traveling through my model. I don't know how I got the Chinese gig. I wanted to learn Mandarin and maybe move to China. So initially the plan was do traveling landscape modeling with the photographers that I already know, I trust. We went to a few different countries together. And then I wanted to go to Japan to work for the Olympics. And I booked some really big Olympic campaigns, but then everything was canceled because of COVID. And my goal was to go from Japan to China for the next set of Olympics, and I wanted to be in Paris for the Olympics that are going on this year right now. And I wanted to learn Mandarin and French because I already have a base in French because of being Canadian, we have to learn French in school, but je ne parle pas français. I don't really speak French because I did not pay attention in class very much. And I was like, why would I learn French? I should learn Mandarin because, well, the only other language I was ever exposed to was Mandarin, and it's way more useful. But I had a base, so I wanted to learn Mandarin, move to China, and then move to France and learn French. But plans changed.
So you then I guess you knew a lot of the photographers in your kind of local area, and then that's kind of the you got the gig, but it's that planted a seed, and then knowing some of the photographers, you were kind of let that sprout a little bit and go into these other different places. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So there's this idea of, if you've ever heard of being a Renaissance man, it was very common back in the Leonardo da Vinci days, right? It's same similar to Mr. Musashi actually, um, where you have this balance and you have left brain, right brain, and you're working both sides of those. You have really done that by being classically trained as a ballerina for a long time, which you had touched on. It, I think you play the piano, maybe not Mozart, but decent, um, right? And then you have this artistic side, but then there's the linguistic side of you. Is any of that intentional, or is that just like I do what I enjoy, and I'm a curious person?
I'm very curious. I want to have 5 languages under my belt. I grew up with one, and I really think that in Canada and America, a lot of us are suffering because we can't connect with people the same when we're only able to speak English. Because you go to Europe, everyone speaks 2 or 3 languages. You go to Asia, a lot of people only speak their local language, but they also speak their own dialect. So that's still two. And maybe they can also speak English. That's three. And it rewires your brain. You're less likely to develop Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'm too curious of a person to just be a housewife and sit at home and wait for my husband. I mean, I would love that one day, I'm not gonna lie, but I wouldn't want to stop learning.
One thing I wanted to that I read that I'm gonna read here, and I'm gonna try to do my best here to read this, and I want you to maybe elaborate. This is your quote. This is what you wrote, and I maybe wanted to hear a little more from you about this. So, this is one of your posts. I think this is 2021. Two very different photos that really show off the true me. I am fun, loving, adventurous, outgoing, but there's also that side of me that gets used to being alone, worries about whatever I made, whether I made the right decision about staying here. We always have to battle our own insecurities. If you always try to look on the positive side, the world will be a better place. Sending everyone out there a lot of love and a big hug. I know we all need one lately. And I wanted to just hear from you, yeah, a little bit more about this. And this is partly what I meant by the real, that I don't know. This is, I mean, this is not the first one where it popped into my head, the word real, but I wanted to hear those two sides of you because I think people in every area, people obviously during the pandemic, very lonely, I think, but also people in faith and in their own spiritual journey, people in having faith in themselves, in and being afraid to travel or being afraid to do the digital nomad lifestyle. There's always that two sides of people, right? That fear driven side and then the outgoing connection loving side of people. But something tells me that for you this has been a lifelong thing and not just a pandemic thing where you've had kind of these two sides of you. And I wanted to ask about that a little bit.
I'm a middle child.
Me too. I understand. Enough
Middle
said. All
child
right. Anyway,
syndrome.
no, just kidding.
Right? Okay, done. I'm a middle child. There's four of us. Um, and there's two middle children. There's four. So I'm the third child. And my mom always just said I was just so independent because I had to be. Because both of my brothers that I'm sandwiched in between were so much work. Like, so much work. And as a kid, I just kind of I remember I remember writing, like I brought my notebook up on top of the walnut tree. This is just a random thought. And I remember singing and writing music and poetry in that book solo. And I used to climb up that tree all the time. But, my mom, so all four of us kids went to a fishing camp because we're country folk and that's what you do when you're 13. My older sister cried and called my mom a few times. My older brother bawled. He didn't want to leave and he cried my mom, like, called my mom. He called my mom like every single morning and night. Me, I was like, okay, bye. And I went off. And then my mom had to call to make sure I was okay. And I was like, why are you calling? Like, I'm at camp. I'm gonna go now. Yeah, I'm good. I'm alive. Love you. Bye. So that's just kind of like a little bit of a representation of me. And at this time, this was July 18th, 2021. So I had been living in Japan for a year and a half. We're over a year into the pandemic. I was actually pretty depressed at this time. I had an eating disorder and I felt really trapped because if I left Japan and went back to Canada, I couldn't return to Japan. And I already lost my apartment in Canada. I had to sell my car. I lost the love of my life. And I felt like I just sacrificed everything to be in Japan. So I had to make it work. So in Japan, when you're modeling, the thinner the winner, the thinner you are, the more money you'll make. So I ended up losing a lot of weight, partially because of my breakup, but also just because of this obsession that I had to now make this work. I had to make as much money as humanly possible. So I was so fixated on money that I became so distant to God and I was worshiping money and I was not fulfilled.
What would you say, other than the cheating answer of God, he brought me back? What kind of brought you back to the realization of, okay, I am focused on the wrong things here?
I don't know if there was an exact turning point. Actually, I do. I do. It wasn't about money though. It was my turning point. I don't think anything would have snapped me out of it. I was obsessed with money and I was obsessed with my image and now I really don't care. Like I'm okay surviving off of like minimal income. I can make it work. I always figure it out. And you've definitely seen the video, if you've done your research, of my apartment getting broken into. That was the turning point. I literally said, like, okay, I have my I have this apartment until February. Should I extend it or should I move on? Because the turning point for modeling would be I ended up in the hospital because I was too thin. And my doctor told me I had to start eating. And I was so obsessed with it because I was studying also to become a certified holistic nutritionist, and I was obsessing over I was like Rain Man with calories. Like I could tell you what's in an almond's 5 calories. I could tell you everything. So I would eat 5 almonds, and I would eat just like a little piece of chocolate during a photo shoot so I didn't pass out. And I would have only black coffee twice a day because I needed the energy. And I would drink water, but only after my photo shoot because I don't want to look bloated. Like I was obsessed. So going to the hospital was the turning point for modeling. I had to quit because when my agent started calling me fat because I was a normal weight, I was like, this is just such a wrong industry for me, for most people mentally. Um, I started doing voiceover work because you can do it and be 500 pounds. Ideally, that's not healthy, but it is possible. But then voiceover also was taken over by AI. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get back into modeling. Acting isn't consistent enough. Voiceover was really good money, but now it's free for them to just use an AI voice. So why would they hire an actress? So I was coming to this turning point in my career where I just realized it's not as lucrative. So I wasn't making as much money. So is it worth it to be in this country without my family and just make it work? Because people are like, well, why would you give up on Japan? You can speak Japanese now. I'm like, okay, but there's always opportunity to move forward. Just because I've been there, I've learned the language. I'm not fluent. でも、まあまあ、なんか、普通の日本語しか話せないけど、だいぶ話せる. I can like get by. Okay. And I can read and like it's nice. It's nice. I feel like I'm at home there. But when my apartment got broken into, that was God sending me a sign. I was so terrified because I could hear the tinkering and I was like, oh my gosh. And my building manager thought I did it. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, I don't even know how to remove people. Why would I do that? So then, and then I was like, okay, well, then I went to Southeast Asia because I was like, okay, if I can't model, if I can't do this, if I can't do that, I like wellness. And I already knew a lot about food because I was obsessed with it. So I started studying about food and studied about how to heal through food. So I wanted to become a doctor when I was younger, but then I decided to study holistic nutrition and I wanted to start running yoga retreats. So I started running yoga retreats in Japan because I think people really need to connect more. And it was really fulfilling. And I got my yoga teaching certificate and I just realized, wow, this is so much more fulfilling being able to give back and connect with people on such a deep level that I'm encouraging them to open up to the point where they're crying and they're getting through some of their past trauma and it's helping me heal as well. That was the turning point. The turning point was my apartment getting broken into and me saying, well, this is a sign from God that I'm meant to leave because not only I've had a stalker when I was living with my homestay family, somebody follow me to my house. And if I would have gone into the house, he would have broken in. I don't know what would have happened. I've been drugged in Japan. And I've also had someone try to break into my apartment. And then they came back later and checked. So, three strikes, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah, that I shared it before we started recording. I had a much less intense, but still enough to really make me uncomfortable. And I'm a man. You know, I did do jujitsu and wrestled growing, so I'm not like afraid physically, but it just made me very uncomfortable. Where I had someone in an apartment building next to me just really going way out of their way to find me, and I ended up moving, by the way. That's like one of the final straws of why I moved far up north. Is I was like, I'm not, especially as the gaijin, like if something were to happen and my Japanese is not even as good as yours, like I'm not even going to be able to answer the questions they're going to be asking me if something were to go wrong, right? Like there's something about this, and I was like, okay, no, I got to make a change. I got to do this. I have a weird feeling that you haven't posted a ton about the solo woman travel tips, but I have a feeling like if you actually tried and sat down, you could think of like a ton of very real practical, right? Again, I do jujitsu. I'm not that crazy. I'm not looking over my shoulder. Let's put it that way everywhere I go. But I can imagine, when you go to some of these places alone, and this is probably the biggest fear from the West, right? And Hollywood hasn't helped with that by any means. But I mean, you want to throw out a couple of those simple tips to maybe help make somebody that hears or watches a little more comfortable traveling solo?
You're never solo. You never admit that you're solo. There's always someone waiting for you. If you have a boyfriend, you have a husband, you have both if you really want to be just secure. No, I'm just kidding. But you're never solo. And there's always like, because if somebody thinks that you're walking back and no one knows that you're going back, that's when you can have issues. And I know people who have had issues traveling. Um, I've been pretty fortunate, but I know that you shouldn't consume alcohol if you're going out because people might slip something in your drink. Like I try to avoid, I always get water and then if I can like put the screw on or I hold my drink like this or I try to drink it at the bar. But then sometimes some places you never know. Sometimes there's been places that bartenders are in on it. So I just try to avoid those kinds of areas because you do want to err on the side of caution. But me, I'm crazy. Like I have hitchhiked in Iceland because my phone died and I was gonna die. I was gonna die. If Hilder didn't pick me up, there's a car. So this, don't do what I do. Like there's so many times where I've hitchhiked, which it's only when I know I'm gonna die. So life or death, stick your thumb up. And you know what? I have 100% success rate. Some people, not so much. But I was in Iceland and my phone died, and I just remembered Strauss or something like that. I'm like, okay, I'm on a Strauss. Well, that's street in Icelandic. So all of the signs end with Strauss or Floss or something like that. So it's like street and like whatever. So I'm like, I have no clue where my Airbnb is. My phone's dead. It's raining. It was John Lennon's birthday. And I was just walking aimlessly looking for the super dry because I knew that was kind of close. And a car comes up and I'm like, it's the only car at 1 o'clock at night. Put my thumb up. And there's a woman driving and a man in the front seat. I'm like, okay, well, this could be bad. I hop in the back seat and he's like, oh, she picked me up too. I was like, is that a Canadian accent I hear? And the guy was from Saskatchewan and he went to Iceland for John Lennon's birthday. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know. I found out and I was modeling in Iceland and I just asked the photographers for one night where I could just be alone, just solo, just go out. It's John Lennon's birthday. It's fun. Well, they had a search party looking for me, and it ended up Hilda took me back, and she told me that she is a nurse, and we're still connected. We're still pen pals to this day. She actually just congratulated me on my baptism 2 days ago. And yeah, she's now a longtime friend because of the conversation we had and the fact that she picks up foreigners every single night after work and takes them home. She knows all the Airbnbs, all the hotels.
That's eerily similar to Spain. If you ever, so I would consider, if I were you, walking the El Camino Trail in Spain. I think this is right up your alley. If you've ever even heard of that, I don't know. It's like you spend about a month walking across the entire country of Spain, and it's called the El Camino. It traditionally it was a pilgrim trail for the Catholic Church, where you go to the different places. Um, I'm not Catholic, but nevertheless, I walked a trail, and it was probably the greatest experience I've ever experienced in my life because it is so unique. And all the places I've ever been, because you are walking from sunup to sundown for 30 days straight. Now, I know that sounds like a workout. It's a little bit, but not really. What's so unique about it is, first of all, 500,000 people every single year walk this trail from all over the world, literally all over the world. I met and had dinners and coffees and lunches and breakfasts with people from every nation of the world: Japan, Korea, China, America, Canadians, Dutch, German. It was unbelievable. Swiss German, Swiss French, right? Like Quebec. I mean, everywhere. It was crazy. And I was like, literally Russians. I would sit down and have dinner with 7 different nations at the same time, right? Now, what makes it unique is because you're walking for so many hours, right? I sound like a salesman for the Camino. You're walking for so many hours. You are walking with people and you're connecting and you're relating. And there's like wild apple trees all over the trail. So you could just like grab it off the tree and eat it, you know? And like one of the coolest memories I ever had was walking. So I grew up on Nashville, horse farm, stereotypical. It is what it is. But like grabbing an apple from the wild apple tree and then seeing a horse pasture like 20 meters away and throwing apples into his pasture so he could have a treat, which I'm sure the stable person was not thrilled with, but it was like just that cool. And then I'm eating apples, watching him, right? You're alone for at least 4 to 6 hours like of the day, because everyone kind of has this understanding. It's like you don't get attached to anybody, right? So when you're walking, like you meet people and there's a couple of different trail paths and forks in the road. So, hey, I'm going to try this way and I want to go the waterfall way, and you split. Very safe. But at the same time, I've seen more of Spain because of this than any other country in the entire world, by far, times 10, because you're not flying or driving or even taking buses or even hitchhiking. You're literally walking across the whole country. And if you want to get really fancy, there's a El Camino de Portugal. You could do the Portuguese El Camino, which goes from Lisbon, Portugal, at the very southern. You walk through the entire country of Portugal, cross the border at Tui, and go to Santiago Compostela. And I actually have a friend that has an albergue out there that I stayed with and worked with. And it was the greatest form of missions and volunteering I had ever seen in my life. It was so brilliant. His name is Alfonso. If you, by the way, side note, if you ever happen to do this, I'll connect you guys and you can stay. And he's so welcoming. And he has a little villa out there, and he needed help because he's getting into his older years. I grew up on a horse farm. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to help. Literally every single night, he like welcomes people for donation only. It's completely free into his home. And it was like the entire world. Traditional volunteering and missions is you have to go out, right? Which I don't think there's anything wrong with. But when he realized this 40 years ago and started doing this, he was like, the nations are coming to me and I'm giving them a hot meal and literally breaking bread with them and connecting with them. Again, I sound like a salesman for the El Camino, but it's like unbelievable. I was a changed person after walking this, and I grew up in faith, so it's not, it wasn't like it was this spark moment, but it was just this realization of just seeing these people and having dinners and going to an albergue and having a Russian woman. The first thing she asks me is, "What do you think of Trump?" And I have to go, listen, this changed my perspective of my life forever, and it's very relevant for now. I go in there. We're the only two in the room. Beds or bed again. She's like, "Oh, American, what do you think of Trump?" And I'm like, listen. You know my next question if you want to go down this road. And she goes, "You're gonna ask about Putin, huh?" I'm like, "Of course, of course, right? Like, I want to hear your perspective, and I'll give you mine. I'll be honest with you. By the way, safe, friendly. We had this. This is the first experience of my life where I am having this conversation with this Russian woman. Very calm, very peaceful. She's like, you have to understand in the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed, like it was like starvation and abject poverty. Now, I'm not the biggest fan. This is her words, right? Would she say this on camera? Probably not. But like, I'm not the greatest fan of this guy in the history of the world, but he has helped my nation so much that there is a reverence, there is a respect that I hold for this guy, right? And I had to give my opinion on Trump, and it was just fascinating, right? No arguing, peaceful, and it was like not something you're ever going to experience in the media, not something you're ever going to experience unless you're actually doing that. Now, like, how often do an American, especially now, and a Russian, get to see eye to eye and hear a calm, like, perspective from each other? And it was like event after event after event happening like this made me just go, there is something happening here that is deeper than the flesh, that is deeper than the physical walking, right? It was unreal, unbelievable. And it sounds very similar to some of the stories that you've experienced as well.
Sounds right up my alley. Sorry.
No, I'm telling you, I tell everyone to go, and not enough people listen. And the one or two that have are like, whoa. And I'm like, I know it's the best kept world secret ever. It's so hard to explain. It will change you, and you will tell everyone to go do it too because it's so unique. And the other thing as well is there's enough people walking, even on the Portugales El Camino, that you feel safe. You don't have to be like looking over your shoulder at all times. Be wise, but you're very, very safe. And the albergues, which is like a hostel for pilgrims, basically, are very, very reasonably priced, very cheap, and very safe. And it's like amazing. But one thing I wanted to ask here: take me back to middle school, high school. Who are you as a person?
I was a few different people in like middle school and high school. I jumped schools a lot, actually. I got bullied a lot. And one thing a lot of people don't know about me is I'm actually missing a tooth. Like, yeah, I got picked on a lot because of that. And I've never actually gotten it fixed because I want to do motivational speaking one day. And I need to gain a lot of confidence with a lot of what I'm doing because a lot of people look at me and they think, wow, you look so confident. Oh, but there's a lot I want to do. And even with the solo female travel tips, I wanted to make that a series, but I also just didn't want to be like, wow, what can I do? This another solo female travel tip. I didn't want to be fake, but I think it is important to know. And when I was in middle school, high school, I got bullied so much. I was so insecure. And yeah, I did not enjoy my experience, and I bounced schools a lot. And I didn't have any really long-lasting friendships, which is why I think I'm so addicted to connecting with people now, is because I just wanted that as a kid and I never got it. So, yeah, I hung out with the popular girls when I switched schools with my brother, and they were so mean. It was like, I'd rather not be with the popular girls. I don't need to be cool. I'm not cool. I'm not a cool person, but I have some cool stories and I like listening to people's stories. You know, I would way rather that than be popular in high school because I'm so grateful I didn't peak in high school.
Sounds like you haven't even come close to peaking with some of the things that you would like to do.
There's a lot I want to do. I start things like my YouTube channel. I have so many videos. I have traveled and met so many cool people, but the computer I have right now is not really strong enough. So every time I try to edit, my computer crashes. So that's a challenge. So I actually can't even edit the videos. And then I had somebody that I met in Rwanda that started helping me. And then I figured I was like, okay, I'm not going to use my fancy camera anymore or my Osmo or anything. I'm just going to shoot on my iPhone because it's good enough. But all the older videos, I have so many interesting videos, so many interesting stories that I'd love to share. I just need to figure out my next step and what I actually want to focus on. I know I want to go back to Tanzania because I fell in love there. I love the culture, love the food, love the people, love like the language, and people are so loving, and it it's very different from Japan in a lot of ways. It's very warm and welcoming, and like Japan is as well, but to an extent. I will always be gaijin. And even in Tanzania, obviously I'm white. I don't look like everyone else there. But if I speak Swahili, they respect you. And I think even in Japan, doesn't matter how good your Japanese gets, you'll always be a foreigner. Even my friends who were born there as a foreigner, or even half Japanese, half foreigner, they're treated differently. And I do kind of like being treated differently in a way. I do like being unique, but I I was volunteering in TZ, and like you said earlier, I did post it, but I also didn't want to boast about it. But I wanted to, I through those posts, I received funds so I could support my sponsor kid. I was able to support my sponsor kid, and that means the world to me. But if I didn't share that with anyone, no one would know. So there is that balance of doing humanitarian work and then trying to look good volunteering and posting that online. Because I did meet people while I was there that came for 4 days. And they were like, oh, this was so tough. I can't, I have to go vacation in Zanzibar for a week to just process. I'm like, okay, I'm here for 3 months and I can't afford a trip to Zanzibar. But you really feel so much better when you get to see the impact that you're making. When you go there for a few days, you don't really see the impact. You don't really get to know people. And then, they're just going to have this cycle of people coming through. If you're there for like a little bit longer, you can actually connect and like fall in love with these people and know that they're actually going to have a better life because of maybe what you're doing and what other people are doing. But if you just see like, oh, these people have this illness or they lost their husband or they lost their child or this or that, you only hear the tragedies. And that's what people want to bring back with them. But I want to hear and see the improvement, which is why I have to go back in October because I want to be there for their graduation because I was there for the women's empowerment program when I was with in the beginning of the year. And now I don't know, maybe I'll go there in the beginning of the program and at the end every year because I think it'd be amazing.
A really good friend of mine actually spent about 6 months in Tanzania and never stops talking about it, like in a positive way. I think even with my experience in South Africa and Sierra Leone, right before the Ebola breakout, um, Africa's one of these weird places where everyone is so scared to go, and it's like we gotta be careful, and it's so hard to live there, and I think that is like so underrated, even like for like adventure type travel as well. I'm not talking about safaris, right? There is that, don't get me wrong, but like how welcoming people are, how amazing the communities are. So when you talk about doing some of the work and being there for 3 months and seeing the actual impact of that, it is amazing how cohesive they work together and the communities and how giving, whether they have a lot or a little, how giving they are is unbelievable. It sounds to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that Africa made an impact on you, a lasting impact.
I've always felt called to go. Like, I always knew I wanted to go. it was on my bucket list since I was a little girl. My like I had it. I don't know where it went, but one of the top things, like the number one thing was fall in love. And then it was like get married, have kids, and go skydiving, volunteer in Africa. And I just remember like, whoa, this is, I never had to go to Japan on my list, but I added to it. And I have a rule like I want to do 70% of my bucket list. And I always make a bucket list every time I travel anywhere. I'm okay not achieving 100% of it, but 70% is pretty decent in a lifetime. And I've done way more than I ever anticipated to do.
So that's what I was gonna ask. Is like, what are a few things that are still on the list that you're like, I want to do that?
Antarctica. Antarctica is expensive though. So I would want to do that sponsored. I really want to make this documentary in Rwanda. And I went to Rwanda this past, just a few months ago. And I want to go back with funding because I was self-funding it and it was, you need proper permits. I've now been connected with a fixer there. I've met amazing people. I know incredible stories that I want to share. And I want to remember what happened, but not dwell on it and show how they reunited and the rebuild of Rwanda. Because this country is it is the safest country in Africa, and their capital city is one of the cleanest cities in the world. So they have really rose from the ashes. They really have. And a lot of them are very faithful. And I think because they kept their faith, they were able to survive, and now they're thriving. And I really want to show it in a different light because everyone just thinks of Hotel Rwanda, and I want to paint a better picture because it's not like that anymore. That was 3 months, 30 years ago.
That's amazing. You mentioned a documentary. Sorry, I can't just brush past that. You want to make a documentary? Tell me about that.
So I read a book by Romeo Dallaire, who was the United Nations leader of Rwanda, and he was trying to prevent the genocide, and he was warning people, and he didn't get the funds and the aid that he needed. And it happened the year that I was born. So when I was in grade six, I got in the newspaper for doing a project on the genocide in Rwanda. But I've always wanted to go there, and I've always wanted to see what it's like, and I've always wanted to learn firsthand. When I went there, I didn't expect it to be so green and hilly. They call it the land of a thousand hills. And I renovated a house with a church. I stayed with the pastor and his wife, and I met the wife's family. I attended funerals. I cried with people. I consoled them because it was during the remembrance ceremonies, which is the hardest time to travel to Rwanda, especially on the 30th anniversary because it's um it's like digging up the past. They were relocating bodies, and I went to this funeral, and it was very traumatic, I would say. But it's not always like that. It's not people having these very visceral flashbacks. I saw some women having such visceral flashbacks of the trauma of their past, and they were screaming like "Don't kill me" in Kinyarwanda, or screaming their children's name. And there's crimes against humanity that happened, yes. Reading Romeo Dallaire's book Shake Hands with the Devil and how his faith got him through it, and staying with the pastor's wife and hearing how everyone in the church was slaughtered but her and her family, and how her faith got her through it, and how everyone just wakes up and says, "Praise God, I'm alive. I made it." Like they appreciate life so much more, and they rejoice in their suffering because they have built character and they endured through so much and they had the hope to survive. Like Romans 3, they are warriors and survivors, but they're not dwelling on the past.
Okinawa is the same way. Very few of the Okinawans. So there's obviously the three capital. So most people don't know this. The three capitals of Christianity within the Japanese church, they're going to all sound familiar to you. Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and Okinawa. And there's a quote from a general that says, even the weeds are burned. Everything's gone. So when you come to this island, every building, essentially everything is less than 80 years old because it was all gone from the war. But when you find out that there's the largest amount of centenarians, people that live to 100 years old, are found here in Okinawa, you have to realize with some simple math, every single one of them, by definition, went through World War II. And that burning of even the weeds and the amount that they have processed in a good way, where they don't dwell on it, but they're just love to be alive, happy to be in community, right? They have their own uchinaguchi, right? Their own dialect and different things like that. And they just like, there's something about them that is real. I'm going to go back to that word, real. And the same thing I found very quickly within your content that I couldn't really put words on is the same thing I found in Africa, right? There are officially, these numbers are skewed because of government recording whatever, but officially there's more Christians in Africa by far than anywhere else in the world. Africa is actually where I found meditation in the Christian form. And I didn't realize until going there and staying there how common it is and how common practice it is there, right? So I think in the West, we have two things that our Christians are sometimes afraid of: bowing before God and meditation. Both of which is because of the connotation that goes along with those, right? So again, Abdurrahman, Abdul were my friends growing up. So the Muslim faith with bowing, sometimes Christians feel uncomfortable, or right? And then Buddhism in terms of meditation. But how common that was in Africa really surprised me. And that's where I found the daily practice of intention-based meditation was actually in Sierra Leone and in South Africa, and meeting them, and Mudasa, and talking with him, and just hearing his perspective of this, and the peace and the strength and the relationship he was able to find with his creator through these processes is so powerful. And I think the Christian church could worldwide, ecclesia, like the worldwide church, the Christian faith, can really use that, especially right now. That's really unsurprising. This conversation went very differently than it just went different than I thought, in a very good way, in a very positive way. And I'm like, I don't know. Obviously, I think when I said like there's a realness in what you're talking about and what you're doing, I think I nailed that on accident, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I'm gonna do some quick rapid fire here. And this is maybe right like a kind of a more lighthearted, in a good way here. So I'll just ask you some basic things. Number one travel secret.
Less is more. No, less is more. Less is more. You don't need to pack everything you need. You can buy it while you're there, and it'll be way more affordable and probably better quality.
Bringing up old memories. You're trapped for 1 year in one place in the world. Where are you at?
Philippines. I say that, but it'd probably be Japan. I mean, I've already been trapped in Japan. I speak the language. It's kind of fun. But, oh, actually, would it be the Philippines? Probably. Probably the Philippines. I love the Philippines and I love fresh fruit. If I was in Japan, I'd have to like work a lot and like maybe make my way down south. I did love Okinawa, but I love being somewhere where I can have fresh fruit.
The one item you said you're going to try to get at least 70% of your bucket list. The one item on your bucket list that is like a non-negotiable, it's going to happen, but hasn't happened yet.
Get married.
Not a bad one, right? 3 books everyone needs to read.
Atomic Habits, The Alchemist, the Bible.
What can everyone can expect from you in the very near future here? Obviously, you're going back to Tanzania in October. What else?
So honestly, my plan, I have so many ideas for things I want to do, but I know I need to focus more so. So when I'm in Canada, I feel like I'm always getting pulled in so many different directions because I've got family and friends, and there's the lake, and there's this, there's that. I have to work multiple jobs, and I don't have a car, which makes it really challenging. So when I'm in TZ, I really want to get writing again. And I want to say one of the books that I started writing in 2020, I have 112 pages written. So I am pretty deep in that one, and there's another one that's got 100 pages written. So it is something that I would love to finish and continue. And I have a list of books I want to write from my journeys. I've had some incredible experiences, and I know I can teach people. But editing videos is also on the list. I just need to figure out where I want to focus my energy.
Last question I wasn't going to ask as a rapid fire thing, but do you have a specific scripture that's really on your heart that is kind of like your favorite scripture?
Yeah, I kind of quoted it earlier. It's Romans 5:3. Not only that, but we should rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character. Character produces hope, and hope is something we should not put to shame because it has been given to us through the Holy Spirit. And I've suffered a lot, and I'm such a stronger person because I know people who haven't had like any struggles in life, and I just feel like they're more fragile and I'm a bit more agile. I feel like I'm malleable.
And do you have anything last thoughts? I don't know. Any you want to share?
Being nomadic is a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. You have to give up stability and your home. You don't have to, but it's what can happen. And for me right now, I'm in an in-between phase. I've had different levels of the nomadic lifestyle, but I always had a home in Vancouver. I always had an apartment that I came back to. So I would travel for contracts, modeling, and doing whatever, or just exploring, visiting family. But I always had a home. During COVID, I lost my home. I accepted that because sometimes I take the path of most resistance, but at that time I took the path of least resistance. And I'm grateful because it opened me up to learning a new language, a new culture. I learned a lot about myself, and I had the ability and the financial means at the time to be able to start traveling. But if you want to be a content creator, you have to know you're going to go quite some time without making money. And if you're not consistent and if you don't put out good quality content, you're not going to make any money. So you shouldn't do it for the money. Do it because you actually enjoy it. Because I don't do it for the money. TikTok doesn't really pay you that much. Instagram, yeah, like live streaming can be okay. But YouTube, I know you can do really well on YouTube, but it takes so long. One of my friends, currently Hannah, only just retired to just being a YouTuber. It took her like 7 years of posting a video every day. And, her fiance, boyfriend at the time, he supported her. And, she was working on other projects. It's a huge commitment. And I see now kids want to become influencers. I wouldn't necessarily encourage it. I would encourage creating content that you actually love and you want to look back at and remember, make memories, whatever it may be. But if you're just selling yourself for videos online or You choose a niche and you're stuck with that niche. You really have to be careful. Don't do it for money.
Wow, this conversation was fantastic. Thank you, Alexandria, for hopping on with me and in a positive, lighthearted, silly note. I'm so glad that you go by your full name, which is like
Stop it.
irrelevant.